The election of 1860 stands as one of the most pivotal turning points in American history, directly precipitating in the descent towards civil war. To understand its significance, let's talk about it in 7 clear steps. By 1860, the United States was deeply divided over the issue of slavery. Events like the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the violence of Bleeding Kansas had already shown that the compromise between North and South was breaking down. The North increasingly opposed the expansion of slavery, while the South saw such opposition as a threat to its way of life and economic system. These tensions created a political environment primed for conflict. If you've been enjoying my content recently, please consider subscribing to the channel, as it is the very best way to support the hard work I do for these videos. And now let's continue. For decades, parties like the Whigs and Democrats had helped maintain a balance between the North and the South. But by 1860, the Whig Party had completely collapsed, and the Democratic Party itself had split along sectional lines. This breakdown meant that instead of 2 major national parties, there were now multiple parties representing regional interests. This fragmentation made it nearly impossible to find national unity during this election, and it also paved the way for new political parties, like maybe the Republican Party. Unlike most elections, the election of 1860 featured 4 major candidates, each representing different regions and ideologies. Abraham Lincoln of the Republican Party opposed the expansion of slavery into new territories, though did not immediately propose abolishing slavery where it had already existed. Stephen A. Douglas, the Northern Democrat, supported popular sovereignty, allowing territories to decide on slavery for themselves. He was the big advocate for the Kansas-Nebraska Act 6 years prior. John C. Breckinridge, of the Southern Democratic Party, supported the protection of slavery in all territories and was the incumbent vice president under James Buchanan. John Bell, who didn't really stand much of a chance in this election, tried to avoid the slavery issue and preserve the Union. As for Lincoln himself, his Republican platform focused on stopping the spread of slavery, not abolishing it where it had already existed. This position appealed strongly to Northern voters, who feared that slavery would expand westward and dominate national politics. Lincoln also emphasized economic modernization, including railroads and industry, which further strengthened his support in the North. However, his name did not even appear on many of the ballots in southern states, showing just how divided the nation was. When the votes were counted, Lincoln won the presidency, with a majority of the electoral votes, but only about 40% of the popular vote. He carried every northern state, but received almost no support in the South. Meanwhile, Breckinridge dominated the Deep South. Douglas won only Missouri and part of New Jersey, and Bell carried a few border states. This outcome made one thing clear: the United States was no longer functioning as a unified political nation. Instead, it had effectively split into 2 separate regions with opposing values, opposing priorities, and opposing meanings. Lincoln's victory triggered immediate fear in the South. Many Southern leaders believed that his election meant slavery and their entire social system was under threat. As a result, several states chose to leave the Union rather than accept him as President of the United States. Beginning with South Carolina, states seceded and formed the Confederate States of America. This was not just a political disagreement, but it was the beginning of a national crisis that would soon erupt in war. The election of 1860 directly led to the outbreak of the American Civil War. After Lincoln took office, tensions escalated rapidly, culminating in the Confederate attack on Fort Sumner in April of 1861. What had started as a political division over slavery and states' rights turned into a full-scale war that would define the future of the United States. The election of 1860 was far more than a typical political contest. It was a reflection of a nation on the brink of collapse. The combination of sectional tensions, the breakdown of national political parties, and the emergence of regionally focused candidates made compromise impossible. Lincoln's victory, while legitimate, exposed the deep fractures within the country and triggered secession of the southern states. Ultimately, this election demonstrated that the United States could no longer avoid confronting the issue of slavery, and their failure to resolve the crisis for the last 40 years has now led to civil war.